I don't know how, but the Jets find a way to beat the Giants. We'll talk about what it means today on Locked On Jets.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's Monday, October 30th, 2023, and I'm your host, John B. from GangGreenNation.com. Thanking you so much for making the show your first listen or first watch every day. Subscribe to the show for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you get new episodes as soon as they're posted. If you enjoy the show and are listening on a podcast source, please give it a 5-star review. If you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, give this episode a big thumbs up. These things help us out, help other Jets fans find the show. I don't know how they did it, but the Jets found a way to beat the Giants 13-10 in overtime yesterday to improve their record to 4-3. The Jets are now on a 3-game winning streak. It was a game that seemed lost at many points. In fact, there was one point in the fourth quarter, if you believe in win probability, that the Giants had a 99.9% chance of winning, but somehow the Jets come through with a victory. So you got to be happy with that. It was not the prettiest game. I noticed I did not say it was an overtime thriller because this game was not exactly thrilling. It was not a particularly well played game, but you don't, the standings don't reflect style points. This is not college football where, your spot in the standings is determined in part subjectively by how good it looks. In the NFL, all that matters are wins and losses. And coming away from this game, I had a thought, and it's that sometimes you have seasons where just like nothing goes your way, where you can't catch a break, and things just aren't lined up for you. And then you have years where it just feels like luck is on your side. And I know it's a weird thing to say in a season where the Jets lost their starting quarterback for the year, 4 games into the season, but this kind of feels like a season where things are just lining up for the Jets. I felt this way last year too, and that's one of the reasons it was so frustrating the Jets failed to take advantage. Last year, it was all the backup quarterbacks they were getting on the schedule, and the Jets got off to a great start a year ago, but could not finish. This year, it's a little bit different. This year, it just kind of feels like in close games, the ball is bouncing the Jets' way. And I don't want to take away credit from the Jets because at the end of the day, the Jets are making the plays. And at the end of the day, even when the ball's bouncing your way, you can fail to do what you need to do. So one of the things I want to emphasize, the Jets are doing good things here, and that's why they're winning. And wins in the NFL are all about the opportunities that are presented to you and whether or not you take advantage of them. Sometimes the opportunities aren't presented to you. And in this game, I think it was true 2 weeks ago against the Eagles. I think to an extent it was true against Buffalo week 1. These are combinations of the Jets doing the things that they need to do and, them getting a few good bounces of the ball. In this game, I think if you look at the last minute of regulation for the Giants, it was a complete disaster. And I'll tell you, if I was a Giants fan today, I think I'd be out on Brian Daboll because Brian Daboll, in my opinion, played a big role in the Giants losing that game. I did not understand his approach in the final drive of regulation, especially on a 4th and 1 from the Jets' 17-yard line, 28 seconds left. That's an obvious spot to go for because the most likely scenario of something that could go wrong in that spot is a kick being blocked and run back. And if you watch the play, Will McDonald actually jumped over the line and almost blocked the kick. And if the ball had taken a good bounce, the Jets could have potentially gotten the scoop and score to win the game in regulation. But Brian Daboll making just I thought, an incomprehensible coaching decision. And then Graham Gano missing the field goal. Jets go out and make some plays, but on the first play, the Jets' final drive, and it was a desperation drive. They got the ball on their own 25-yard line. Zach Wilson hits Garrett Wilson for a 29-yard gain, which is a great play. The problem is the Jets are out of time, or the Jets are out of timeouts there, so they can't stop the clock. But Kayvon Thibodeau jumps off sides on the play as the ball's being snapped. So not only did the Jets get a big completion, but the clock stops because of the penalty on Thibodeau. And that's one of the things that's easy to forget because obviously after a 29-yard completion, the Jets are going to decline an offsides penalty. But the offsides penalty actually mattered a lot because it stopped the clock after the play. Even though the Jets did not take the penalty, a declined penalty in the last minute stops the clock and gives you a chance. It essentially gives you a bonus timeout because the Jets were out of timeout. So even if they complete that pass, if Thibodeau does not jump off sides, the Jets may run out of time. I'm not convinced the Jets get another playoff. And if they do, they may have to throw a Hail Mary. The field goal may be off the table. So gave the Jets a chance to kind of huddle, settle up, and not lose much time. The play only cost 7 seconds. Then on the next play, Zach Wilson makes a fantastic play. I mean, Zach Wilson had a rough game, but he made 2 fantastic throws in the final drive of the fourth quarter. And he hit Alan Lazard for a 29-yard gain. And then beyond that, the Jets did an excellent job getting up to the line of scrimmage. I really thought they were going to run out of time, but somehow they were able to spike the ball to stop the clock just in time. I mean, maybe 1 second left on the clock, and may have been like a fraction of a second before the clock hit 0. But, if you look at how this happened, I mean, it was a combination of Jets doing great things and some things bouncing the Jets' way. I mean, I don't want to take credit away. Zach Wilson made some great throws on that drive. The Jets really, as critical as I am of their offensive coaching, the fact they were able to get that ball spiked with 1 second left, I mean, that was a great job. That showed that they've been drilling this in practice. Sometimes the end of the game scenarios come down to whether or not your team is prepared in practice in the lead up to a game. And I think the Jets did a great job getting the ball spiked and giving Greg Zuerlein a chance to kick the game-winning field goal. But it's also true that, things are lining up for the Jets. Jets caught some breaks in this game. And that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. You want to have a season where the breaks just line up one after another. 2 weeks ago against the Eagles, Jets were making a lot of good plays on defense, but the ball was also bouncing where it needed to bounce for the Jets to get turnovers. That's a great thing. Week 1 against Buffalo, there were some fortunate plays in that game. It doesn't always go this way in the NFL, and it creates an urgency to take advantage of it when it does, because this is the type of season where even with Aaron Rodgers out, the Jets are really set up to make a run right now. The Jets are really set up to be a playoff team, and the way the defense looks, this could be a team nobody wants to play. The way the special teams is playing, I actually got one right. My record predicting Jets games through the years has not been great. I said 13-10, which was actually the final score, and I also noted special teams could make a difference. I think there's no question that the Jets won the special teams battle in this game, and that was a big reason that they came out ahead. The Giants were awful on special teams. The Jets were phenomenal on special teams. That played a huge role in the final outcome. But things are just lining up for the Jets. They got through that early tough schedule. They've caught the breaks they needed to swing some of these tight games. And now the schedule continues to open up. I mean, look, the Jets probably should have lost this game. If we're being honest, if the Giants just did what they needed to do, the Jets would have lost this game, and the tenor of this podcast would be very different. But, it doesn't matter what should have happened. What matters is what did happen in the NFL. And you have to figure out ways to win when you're not at your best. And the Jets were very good, I think, in 2 of the three phases of this game. I think special teams was excellent. Thomas Morstead was the star of the game for the Jets. Greg Zuerlein, I mean, 2 kicks he should make, but still 2 pressure kicks in bad weather. The defense was excellent. I mean, I don't see how you can say anything bad about the defense. I mean, maybe it wasn't the toughest opposition you had to face. Maybe it was easy because you're facing a team that had 0 threat of passing the ball. But at the end of the day, the defense gave up 7 points in this game. Giants had 10. 3 of them were spotted by a fumble by the offense at the start of the game, and the Jets held the Giants out of the end zone. So defense, I mean, it's tough to complain about the defense that gave up 7 points all game that really shut down the Giants, aside from maybe 1 drive in the third quarter and maybe, a couple bad penalties. But outside of that, a really good performance by the defense. The only bad point of this game for the Jets was the offense. And, I hate to be the guy that says anything bad after a victory, but as we continue this Monday edition of Locked On Jets, we're going to talk about the offense. The Jets just have to be better. This offense, the Jets were able to win this game this week. They were able to win 2 weeks ago with a bad offensive performance, but that's not going to continue. Jets have to figure this thing out on offense, and we'll discuss that in more detail as we continue this Monday edition of Locked On Jets. This episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by eBay Motors. Our partners at eBay Motors have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Football host Vinny Iyer to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week all season long. Whether you're prepping for a daily draft or scouting the waiver wire, every week we're going to provide you with players who are guaranteed to fit on your roster. So let's see who Vinny has picked out for us on this week's eBay's Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Picks of the Week. Falcons wide receiver Drake London had a rather quiet Week 8 against the Titans secondary, as he caught only 5 passes for 55 yards, but he should be targeted to get on track with a much bigger game against a vulnerable Viking secondary in Week 9. With a potential quarterback change looming to Taylor Heineke, Atlanta should be a much more effective downfield passing team, and London could see some high volume in this game. Vinny Iyer from Locked On Fantasy Football is going to help you win your fantasy championship. And eBay Motors knows a championship team is all about each player being a perfect fit. The same goes for your vehicle. And with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly. Brake lights, LED headlights, roof rack, bumpers, whatever your baby needs eBay Motors has it. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers, eligible items only, exclusions apply. Thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first listener, first watch every day. A big shout out to you everydayers. This is a daily podcast covering the news. If you're new to the show, we have new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday. Today we're talking about the Jets' victory, 13-10 over the Giants. I think it's fair to say the Jets played very well in two of the three phases of this game. I think they were excellent on special teams. I think they were excellent on defense. I think that the offense struggled. In fact, I think there were two big problems with the Jets in this game. Number one was penalties. There were just too many penalties, and there were some really bad penalties. I mentioned in the first segment that there was really only one bad drive the Jets had on defense all game where they gave up a touchdown. Well, they gave up a touchdown in part because they committed two 15-yard penalties against the struggling Giants offense. And, they drive extending penalties, 9 penalties for 85 yards this game for the Jets. I don't think they're going to commit that many dumb penalties through the course of the season. I think that was just one of those things where, I don't know, maybe it all added up. Maybe, I don't know, guys were in a bad mood because it was raining. It's difficult to put two and two together and figure out any real reason. I think it would maybe just been a coincidence that the Jets committed that many dumb penalties in this game. I don't expect that to continue. The other bad part of this game for the Jets was the offense. And look, it's great that the Jets offense came to life at the end of the regulation period. It's great that they put together a decent drive in overtime to win it, set up Greg Zuerlein for a game-winning kick. But this performance is just, it's not a winning performance. The Jets were lucky they were playing the Giants in this game. I mean, it's amazing that the Jets have had 2 straight games where they've averaged less than 4.2 yards per play on offense, and they've won both games. Because heading into yesterday, teams that have averaged less than 4.2 yards in a game in the NFL this season have been 10-31. So that's like less than a 250 winning percentage. And somehow the Jets have won 2 straight games doing this. And, part of it's the defense is really good. And it was, again, a really good performance by the defense. I mean, you can nitpick a few things. You can obviously point out the Giants had no intention of throwing the ball. The Brian Daboll game plan was, even with the third string quarterback, was really tough to fathom. But the offense has got to get better. I know we keep saying this, and I know the Jets have won a couple. I know I've been saying this for a couple of weeks, and I know the Jets have continued to win games. But over the long haul in the NFL, if you have a unit that's as weak as the Jets' offense looks right now, it's a problem. And I think that this is a bigger concern for the team because I don't know that this is so fixable. I think there are lots of personnel issues with this team on offense, and the number one issue I think is that, and you may think I'm going to go with the offensive line. That might be the number 2 issue. The number one issue is that I don't know the Jets can produce good plays outside of Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall. Breece Hall had a 50-yard touchdown in this game on a check down from Zach Wilson. Garrett Wilson had 100 yards receiving. Outside of those two, where were the big plays? I mean, Lazard had one play near the end of regulation that set up the field goal, and that's the play, the 29-yard completion where the Jets got up to the line and spiked the ball. But, I mean, he had about 3 balls that hit him in the hand that fell to the ground incomplete. Lazard is very frustrating to me because he's a big-bodied receiver, but he doesn't play big. I mean, he's not great at contested catches. He's not great at making tough catches in traffic. And for a big guy who's never going to create great separation, that's frustrating. And after Lazard, I mean, I don't know who you have. I guess, Conklin might be the number 3 receiver. And, Conklin, if he's your number 3 target, that's not great. The offensive line's also an issue. I mean, look, the Jets suffered a million injuries in this game. I don't think the plan going into the season with the offensive line was that great, but all the what I'm talking about earlier about how everything is lined up for the Jets, how they're getting all the lucky breaks in the fourth quarter of games. The opposite is true of the offensive line. I mean, they had to go through 3 centers in this game, and by the way, one of their top 3 centers wasn't even playing, so they were on their 4th string center by the end of this game. They had to reshuffle the line multiple times because of injuries. Wes Schweitzer goes down, Connor McGovern goes down in this game. You're already without Elijah Vera Tucker. You're already without Dwayne Brown to the extent that matters. It's bad on 2 fronts. First of all, you have to reshuffle the line. which is always tough because you got guys playing with no chemistry. Second, the backups are worse players than the starters. So it's always a double whammy when you suffer injuries on the offensive line. I don't know how you work around this. And the Jets, the Jets lost a fumble because they had to make another center change. Xavier Newman, who was the replacement center, the first snap he made to Zach Wilson was a fumble, and that's just the kind of thing that happens when you're replacing centers in and out. Apparently, Newman actually did make a big play though at the end of the game. On that play where they spiked the ball at the end of regulation, he apparently knew the rule where he was able to confirm with the official that that's where the ball needed to be spotted, and the Jets were able to get the snap off because of that. So give the guy credit. I mean, for given this tough situation where he wasn't expecting to play at all in this game, and then ended up having to play center because the Jets had 2 injuries. He fought hard, but the offensive line situation, that's tough for the Jets. And then, Zach Wilson, who, made some big throws late in the fourth quarter, but this was a bad game by Zach Wilson. I mean, I think it's difficult to come away feeling good about Zach Wilson from this game. Yeah, and I know the response to that's going to be, look at all the plays he made in the clutch. Well, look, you're not going to win many games when your quarterback plays poorly for the first 59 minutes and 30 seconds. I mean, the Jets were lucky to even Zach Wilson was lucky to even get the ball back to have that opportunity. And, if this was a bad game for Zach, if this was like Zach Wilson's worst game, then I'd feel pretty good about it. But, we're just not getting many great games from Zach Wilson. We're not getting many games like Kansas City where he looks like he's firmly in control of the offense. At his best, he's looking okay. His best, maybe it's like Denver where he looks fine. He's not doing anything special, but he looks fine. And there have been too many games like this where he just for long stretches can't do a whole lot. And it's not all his fault. I mean, look, the Jets, as I mentioned, the Jets have a lot of issues on this offense. And that's one of the things that I think is frustrating. It's not all Zach Wilson's fault. The quarterback always takes too much of the blame when things go wrong. And this is really a system-wide failure for the Jets. The offense has to get better, though. And I don't really know what the answers are right now because I don't think there are many obvious answers outside of just hoping you get better health on the offensive line. But look, a game where you average 4 yards per play, that's not going to be a winning recipe. Even as good as this defense and special teams are, at some point, you got to get something from other guys. You got to get something from the offense. So Jets have a lot to figure out in this week as they lead heading into the Monday night game against the Chargers. But the one thing that you can't like about this performance yesterday was the offense. And it would be one thing if it was an isolated incident, but we've been seeing this offense struggle all season long. And I think something's got to give there if the Jets are going to have a good season. Now, ahead here on the Locked On Jets podcast, we'll turn our attention to the heroes. Who were the players who really stepped up and delivered this victory? Well, we'll tell you as we continue this Monday edition of Locked On Jets. This episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by DoorDash. It's a victory Monday. You want to celebrate. You don't want to have to cook. You want a good meal delivered to you by a Dasher, and that's where DoorDash comes in. There's so many great restaurants in the New York area you can order from DoorDash, including Burano. Chef Albert DeMeglio opened this South Williamsburg restaurant in 2016 with a menu tailored to invoke the kinds of dishes his grandmother cooked for the family. His calling card is fresh mozzarella, handmade daily, and served smoked or salted with extra virgin olive oil. And he prepares Old Country giardiniera, spicy pickled cauliflower, onion, celery, and more that can go on everything, notably a burger. There are so many great restaurants on DoorDash. Burano's one. There's a restaurant for any type of cuisine you could want. There's also chain restaurants if you want something familiar, if you don't want to take a chance. DoorDash has it all. It's a great place to go. And right now you can get 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend $15 on your first order when you download the DoorDash app and enter code LOCKED23. Subject to change, terms apply. Again, that's 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order when you download the DoorDash app and enter code LOCKED23. It's one word with no space, LOCKED, number 2, number 3. Subject to change, terms apply. This is the Locked On Jets podcast here on this Monday. We're talking about a Jets victory. The Jets beat the Giants 13-10 in overtime, Week 8 action at MetLife Stadium. Who were the heroes of the game for the Jets? And this is going to be the rare time I say the punter may have been the best player for a team. I think there may be like 2 or 3 games I can think about where I feel like a punter made a big difference. But Thomas Morstead, can't say enough about the performance. First of all, the Jets made him punt an awful lot because the offense couldn't get anything going. So he punted 11 times, averaged 48.1 yards per punt in the rain. But beyond that, pinned the Giants inside the 5 3 times. An outstanding. And the Gunners couldn't seem to find the ball. So it wasn't just that he put the ball where it needed to go. He put the right spin on the ball because Gunners were like nowhere to be found in these situations where the Jets pinned the Giants deep. It's just the ball took the right bounce. It did not roll into the end zone. So outstanding performance by Thomas Morstead. In fact, I think the Jets' only touchdown of the game was set up by him. It was kind of a sequence where he pinned the Giants deep. Defense got a quick 3-and-out. Jets took over with excellent field position, and then Breece Hall took that catch 50 yards for a touchdown. Breece Hall, another tough game on the ground. I think part of it's just the Jets don't have much of a passing threat right now. So, he averaged 1.4 yards per attempt, 17 yards on 12 carries, but was an impact player in the passing game. Did have a drop, but 6 catches, 76 yards, including that 50-yarder for a touchdown. The Jets' only touchdown of the game. Garrett Wilson, 7 catches, 100 yards. As I said, the offense is essentially Breece and Garrett right now. If they don't do something, nothing's going to happen on offense. The two of them combined to give the Jets just enough. Garrett had a huge catch that huge catch that set up the drive that tied the game, and then a big catch in the overtime drive. Two really good plays on offense for the Jets. On the defensive side of the ball, there's so many people you can praise. CJ Mosley, I think, is finally having the type of season the Jets were hoping for when they signed him back in 2019. An outstanding year for CJ Mosley. 12 tackles, half a sack. Quincy Williams, a really dumb penalty. A couple plays where he was on discipline, but still 11 tackles. Tony Adams, 10 tackles. The defensive line, I think, did a really good job. Quinton Jefferson, the guy who really stood out to me, half a sack, but also making lots of disruptive plays in the backfield, had a tackle for a loss. Really solid job. I think all the way around. John Franklin Myers was disruptive. Quinton Williams continues to look really good. Jermaine Johnson with a dumb penalty, but a bunch of the few instances where the Giants threw the ball, he was consistently in the quarterback's face. He also had a sack. A lot to like about the Jets defense in this game outside of the penalties. Lots of really good performances. And then I think you also have to look to Greg Zuerlein, who has been outstanding this season. I feel like a broken record saying this, but it's amazing what happens when you get a kicker who's actually a proven kicker instead of just trying to find some guy with a big leg from some college program. The Jets struggled with kickers for so many years because they just wouldn't sign a proven kicker who were readily available. Finally, they get Greg Zuerlein, and Zuerlein, 2 kicks you'd expect him to make even in pressure situations, even in bad weather, but he made them, and he's been making kicks all season long for the Jets. Goes without saying, the Jets don't win this game without Greg Zuerlein because they needed both field goals. If they don't make either field goal, if they miss the one in regulation, they lose. If they miss the one in overtime, they probably tie this game. So, Jets win the special teams battle. If you look at this, Graham Gano misses 2 field goals for the Giants. Jets pin the Giants deep multiple times. And on a day where the Giants are really struggling offensively, that essentially ended any hope that they had of putting together drives. Greg Zuerlein making field goals. Jets have a recipe in these close games. The Jets, maybe part of it, look, I think what I said in the first segment is true. Part of it is that Jets are getting some fortunate breaks, and that means you got to take advantage of them. And the Jets are taking advantage of them, and they're setting themselves up to have a big season. But part of it's also sometimes these close games, sometimes a team outperforms its expected record in close games because they get big time special teams performances. It's an overlooked part of the game. A lot of teams overlook the importance, the value of special teams. Not the Jets, and this has been going on for a long time. You go back to the Mike Westhoff days. Westhoff, maybe the best special teams coach of all time, guy the Jets had for over a decade. Brant Boyer also looks like a really good coach on this unit. Jets, by some measures, have the number 1 special teams in football. And I say it all the time. It's the number, if you're an everydayer, you've heard me say this over and over. About 20% of the plays in football are special teams. Lots of teams don't put much value in it. And sometimes in these close games, it can make all the difference in the world. I don't think you can ever say the game came down to one particular factor, but I also don't think it's a stretch to say that the Jets won this game in part because they greatly outperformed the Giants on special teams. A great job by the kicking unit, and the Jets come away with a victory. Anyway, that's all for today's episode. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. As always, if you enjoy the show, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening so that you'll never miss an episode. If you enjoy the show and are listening on a podcast source, please give it a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube, give this episode a big thumbs up. These things help us out, help other Jets fans find the show. Have a great Monday, everybody. Enjoy the Victory Monday. We'll be back tomorrow to talk more Jets.